Okay, I turned that off. Hey, let me ask this. When we're singing, do you mute me?
Yes.
Okay, then I'll just leave it on from now on. Okay. Good grief. Are we starting over, Tim? Okay. Oh my gosh. Earthbound values, heavenbound values. That's what we're talking about. That's what Jesus is talking about today in Mark 6, verses 19 through 24. If you want to turn to your Bible, there it is. It says so right up there. The handout I had glitched along the way, and so you don't have one. Jesus is going to draw our attention to the difference between earthbound values and heavenbound values, and it's about our stuff. It's about the stuff that we accumulate and that we hold on to. Now, Jesus being Jesus and all, what kind of values do you think he's going to affirm? It's not a trick question. Heavenbound values. I just want to make sure you're with me. See, if we focus on our earthbound values, we become like an ugly root-bound plant. I've had this one around my place for a while. Can you see it? Look at that thing. It's saying, I could have been somebody. But no. Here's what they've let me become. Root-bound, ugly, unfruitful, unproductive, useless really, although Jesus says there's enough life that if we just put this in the ground here, I can see what you want to do, I can see what you're trying to do, but somehow or other it just doesn't really work out for you. But if you will let me, like the gardener, the parable of the gardener, will let me fertilize it and give it one more year. If you put this in the ground and I will water it, you have to want to do what I see you doing here, and I believe you do. Do you? Which one do you want to be? You want to be this? Or would you like to be planted in the ground, cultivated around, given some water, and become this? Which one? Earthbound values are root-bound. Heaven-bound values, that thing laid over on this and damaged this beautiful coleus that Nancy has been nurturing. And so it's unfortunate that the root-bound one gained the ground here. But we will resuscitate that because it's a healthy plant that wants to grow. And that's what we're supposed to be doing ourselves. But when we're root-bound, pretty soon our surroundings begin to choke us because we think small. We think earthbound thoughts. We're not thinking about the fuller life we can have here with the eternal life in mind. And I'm convinced that eternity isn't a when-then thing that's going to start when we die. Eternity is this life, this on a timeline, we're in eternity. We're born. We're living. What we're doing here counts towards the forever and ever. And if you think otherwise, you will be stuck with your stuff in an earthbound, root-bound fashion. You can be dipped. This plant, like this plant, you could be dipped in water, just like we dip people in water here. And you're all brand new, and you're just raring to go, and you're excited, and it's wonderful. And you can get sprinkled every Sunday for an hour or two with the Word and still become root-bound because all of the rest of the time you're focused on stuff. So when I read about persecuted Christians, and if anyone wants a copy of The Voice of the Martyrs, I have 2 copies. But when I read about persecuted Christians, and I see that people who put their faith on the line, their lives on the line for their faith, and for sharing the gospel, going out and taking it into places where it's dangerous to be a Christian, to be associated with being a Christian. When I see that, I also look at the surroundings. Hearts on fire is what I see. Here's persecuted Somali Christians in Kenya. But look at their surroundings. Do they have stuff? They have enough. But they're not consumed with stuff. Now, I'm sure any one of them would be happy to have a lawn chair or any of those other things, but those are not necessities. I don't see any really overweight people there either. They look pretty skinny, so food is probably not the big stuff that they have. Hearts on fire. In that article, it's talking about a pastor, Ibrahim, who was a Muslim. He was a Muslim leader, and as the story goes, you have to read it. I won't go into all the details. He becomes a Christian. This man has been clubbed on the head with a rock and had lost his hearing. He's been shot, he's been beaten, he's been ostracized, he's been persecuted, but he's planted 23 churches. This is one of those churches. Would you look at it? You can see through the walls of bits of trees, and almost every one of these that I see has a rusty corrugated roof. Not altogether watertight, not altogether bird tight or insect tight. Looks like it's got a dirt floor, but it's enough. And it doesn't hinder their faith. It doesn't prevent him from doing this, and that is distributing Bibles by camel. He can get hold of the Bibles, he has to be very careful about it, and then distribute them by camel. I don't know if it was his story or another story I was reading about someone distributing Bibles, and they had to tear out one page per person to make sure that there was very little evidence to have to hide. And then, of course, they had their time together where they shared and they grew in that fellowship time of studying the Word, and each one of them growing. With all of this, I have to conclude that we Western Christians are root-bound and choked out by earthbound values that revolve around our stuff, and I am no exception. So if you can include yourself in there in any way, then this message is for you. Now, it's, in most cases, not black or white, one or the other. It's a kind of a hybrid blend of both. But I become conscious when I look at things like this, and I become conscious anyway when I'm doing a lot of things that I'm taking time that I know I also want to be like that little piece put in the ground and have watered. So I started with Hearts on Fire. Now I want to talk about California towns in which we have sister churches in the path of fire. And I'm going, this past week I got an email from Craig Hardinger. He's a pastor of a church called Arcade up in the Sacramento area. And he's the director of our association, once called Next Gen Churches, now called Venture Network. And he's in touch with the churches around the area. And so I'm going to share some of the things that I found in his newsletter. Grizzly Flats. It's a California town leveled by the Calder fire in pictures. You're going to see a few pictures. Has anyone ever been to Grizzly Flats? You have. How many have not heard of Grizzly Flats? I'll tell you where I heard of it. I heard of it at a pastor's leadership conference annual thing at Tuolumne. And there you mingle and you meet other pastors, and talking with one of them one time, he identifies himself as being a pastor at Grizzly Flats. And he says the unique thing about his church that stands out is that people bring their guns to church. Because afterwards, their fellowship time, what just happened? Afterwards, What just happened? Jeez. Afterwards. Oh, I don't like this. Now I'm not going to know what's coming up next. Bear with me. It's one of those days. Okay. Get back on track here. In his email, he said that Grizzly Flats, the church, had been wiped out. Homes of some of the members. Now, it's a small town. It's half the size of Aromas. And yet it has a church. God bless them. They have a church. They come to our conference. They meet and share with one another like they did with me. I learned something about them that makes their church really unique, that after church they go out and shoot. I don't know if they got a shooting range or a hill or whatever. And I think I even heard him mention AK-47. So I don't know if there's any real holds barred on this. Now you can't really read the small writing down in the corner, but here's what it says. The main image is the frames of chairs and the chimney. The only things left at the Grizzly Flats Community Church. That's it. This is what you see. That's their church. That's the homes of some of the people. Earthbound versus Heavenbound. There's a church in Pollock Pines that is in danger. That was as of last Wednesday. Strawberry. That whole area. Yeah, so the church there in Pollock Pines, pastored by an interim pastor, Jim Price, who I also know, is in danger, and they were having a staff meeting, evaluating their building when they got the call to evacuate. That you got to go. I don't know what's happened since then. Sierra Bible Church in South Lake Tahoe. Anybody ever been to South Lake Tahoe? You know, now we're talking more prominent. Do you know the South Lake Tahoe only has 2,000 more people than Prunedale? In the last, it's a population that changes because people come for tourism and gambling and all that, and then it shifts. And so Pastor Rene Schleffler told me that he used to pastor that church, and it was really difficult because one day you've got a congregation and the next day you don't. So we're talking about Heavenbound versus Earthbound, and what I wanted to share then about the churches, sister churches, is that our association has what's called an ACTS fund. It's for compassion. It's a compassion fund for churches that are in trouble, that are suffering, that have great sudden losses, and all of a sudden, imagine Aromas being scorched earth. Our church gone. Our homes, some of our homes. Imagine, I look out over my tree-studded view and I think, you know, in addition to the loss of homes and wildlife, imagine if I was spared and I looked out and all I saw was charred landscape. It's a horrible thought. It would change everything. So, I want to encourage our congregation here, when the offering time comes around or after or sometime, would you consider giving generously over and above what it takes for us to keep our church going? And that will go to this fund, this local fund. You know what? And I dared to imagine, what if I could say, could we raise $1,000? You know, $50 isn't going to do much. $1,000 isn't going to do much. If all our churches would do this, and of course you think of the big church like Twin Lakes, which is also a sister church, they must have money. Well, you know what? Let's remember the church is the people. It's not the building, it's not the facilities, it's not all the different things, it's the people. And so Nancy, I'd like you to, when the offering comes around, for us to do something additional, and if we need to talk about that and pray about that and deal with that later, we'll do that. But let's remember to do that. So we're talking about earthbound versus heavenbound. I also want to thank people who have designated Voice of the Martyrs for us to be of assistance to these churches around the world. Just tremendous amount of settings where people are being persecuted for their faith. They are our brothers and sisters. So here's what Jesus says. He says, "Do not store up treasures for yourselves on earth, where moths and rust can destroy them, where thieves is missing can break in and steal your stuff." Don't store up, don't make your treasures this stuff here that is confined to earth, that is earthbound and rootbound, and is no longer propagating and generating new life and bearing fruit. It's just consumed with itself, and it's becoming a dead thing. It's moving towards death prematurely. That isn't what God has in mind for us. He has wonderful things in mind for us. That's not it. He would take that little coleus and have it become a big, beautiful plant. Our churches should be like that. That's heaven-bound, not earth-bound. Now, back in ancient times, cloth was a very, very valuable commodity. A typical person, they had two pieces of clothing, 2 undergarments and 2 outer garments. And that's what they had. Jesus says, well, if you've got 2 and someone has none, you have 1 too many. You should share 1 of each with that person. But the problem was, especially in those days before nylon and polyester and wrinkle-free and all the different kinds of things we have, moths could get in there and they could eat into that very valuable cloth. Does anyone remember your grandmother's closet? What did it smell like? The drawers? Mothballs. I don't smell those anymore, and it's probably because we don't really even need them. But Grandma's house smelled like mothballs. Kids never eat them. That's one thing they don't put in their mouth. Rust. You know, rust, nowadays he could say clear coat. The clear coat on your car, like Richard, the clear coat on your hood, it will burn out. The clear coat on my roof will burn out. And rust, it's much more vulnerable to rust at this point. And you never buy a used car that's been near the ocean, right? Or in Minnesota where they salt the highways and it all goes up underneath. If you buy something like that, you're going to have to spray the bottom and do all that kind of stuff. Rust. It's not just on your car, it's on all kinds of things. And there's all kinds of other ways that we face corruption and decay. A beautiful redwood deck, they can last, depending on the quality of the wood, can last 30 years if you seal it and take care of it. But then the time comes where you've got to replace it all. It's a big project. It's a costly project. And when I did mine, I needed it to be waterproof underneath, so I went to great lengths and great expense to do a custom surface. But something has gotten me. I used Home Depot flashing on the edge. It's the weak point in the chain. And as I see that rust and rot occurring, it now exposes the beams and the framework underneath that will rot. Right? Your brick deck and driveway will settle or heave if there's a tree branch. So this is the way it is. And Jesus is saying, sure, you need things. You need a home. You need a car. He's not against us having stuff. He is warning us about what happens when we become consumed with stuff, or your things are so valuable you're concerned that someone's going to break in and steal them. And so you have cameras around your house, and we're just talking about that, partly to see the raccoons and who's eating our garden. Had 2 raccoons come in the porch the other night. Yeah. That little dog wants to go out and take them on. Oh my gosh. Okay, so you get it, right? You get the picture. He's saying, you know, if you're all consumed with that, you are in trouble. Ramona. Yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh. Nothing's permanent. We're not permanent. I hurt. He's got rust in his shoulder. He's got dry rot. Yes, sir. Don't store up your treasures. Listen. Have those things that are valuable and necessary, but don't wrap your life around them so that it grieves you when something happens. Well, when I think of this one, it says break in and steal. If you go over to Home Depot, I've noticed that there's a back set of stalls where people park and take up 2 stalls because their cars are shiny and custom and nice, and they don't want anybody parking next to them. So the last time I borrowed Ernie's truck, I pulled up right alongside. Instead, okay, so you've got that side, we've established that very clear, but instead, store up treasures for yourselves in heaven. Isn't that the destination we hope for ourselves? But not just as an escape from the trials as we see them in this life. It's easy to look at heaven as our escape route. When our aches and pains are too much and our breathing is labored and heavy and we're obsolete and incontinent, we look at it as an escape route. Oh, there'll be no pain, no sorrow, no tears, no aches. There's nothing bad up there. And that's just scratching the surface of heaven. That's not even the big thing, but we can look at it as an escape route. Jesus is saying, store up treasures that will be waiting there for you. I think of Pastor Abraham and all of the people that have come to faith by virtue of his sacrifice, his commitment. And he says, I'm compelled to preach. I won't stop. In that article, one of his family members who was high up and was wealthy, high up in Islam and wealthy, offered to give him 200 goats and 50 cows if he would renounce Christ. And he says, I've never heard of a religion that could be bought. Right? Think about it. We might be buyable. And that's what stuff will do. It will buy us away. Store up treasures for yourself in heaven. There, moths and rust do not destroy them. There, thieves do not break in and steal them. What's the them? Your treasures. So this begins to define what our treasures are. And I'd like you to really think about it. I'm going to introduce something I'm not sure I have in a slide here. It's a catchy thing. You might want to write this down. Your pleasure is the measure of your treasure. What pleases you? What really makes you feel happy and good and fulfilled? My family has a monthly Zoom meeting. I have a sister and her husband in Bath, England, formerly in Paris. I have their son and wife in Sweden. One of them has children in Portland. I have brothers with wives and children in Minnesota. Another brother in Iowa, and we get together on a monthly Zoom meeting. And this last one, one of my brothers brought a question. He said, what is the most prominent thing in your life that is making you happy? Bringing joy. Bringing joy. What is it that grabs you and makes your life meaningful? Well, right away, it's my projects. It's the things I do that are a creative, innovative outlet that accomplish a good thing. It takes stuff to do those things, and thank God I am a repurposer of stuff. So what you throw away, I'll pick up. Yep, and when you live on acreage in the country, you become white trash. You do. You know, when this is your mindset, you see the potential and value, and I'd like to think that God wants to repurpose me and make me a repurposer of people. Take those same things and use it to repurpose people who've been discarded, marginalized, sidelined, neglected, despised. Isn't that Jesus? That's Jesus. I want to be more like Jesus. There's three things that we can see in these passages, in this little segment that Jesus speaks to us about today, about storing up treasures in heaven and not on earth. And here's what they are. The pursuit of accumulating stuff. That's materialism. And when we put it in those terms, we kind of want to distance ourselves from it. I don't want to be materialistic. We don't like that term, do we? You're so materialistic. How does that feel? Huh? Feels crappy, doesn't it? Okay. I wouldn't like it if someone said that about me, looked around and said, wow, you got this, and you got that, and you got that. Yeah, but they don't run. Or they barely run. The pursuit of accumulating stuff, that's called materialism, and this is about enslavement. It will enslave your heart. It can enslave your heart when you're consumed with it. Not again that you don't need stuff. Not that Jesus is condemning stuff. He's condemning being owned by stuff. Because here he says it, for your treasure, for where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. So what is your pleasure? What do you hold close to your heart that really, really brings joy? This is a really good one to evaluate. If you've never considered it before, what your pleasure is the measure of your treasure. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So, the pursuit of accumulating stuff, materialism, will enslave your heart. Earthbound values. Now this is going to introduce the next segment. Earthbound values focus on shopping for stuff. And that enslaves the mind. We'll look at the passage here in a second, but I want to talk about this just a little bit. Are there any shoppers? Anyone take pride and joy in being a shopper? Not anymore? You know what I'm talking about though, right? Nancy will call me when I'm out and she's still, what will you say, Nancy? Are you shopping? She'll tell me not to use a card. I can't just not answer the phone. She's going to catch up with me. It's going to catch up. In fact, when I use certain cards, it comes right to her. But I truly do enjoy shopping. I really do. I really do enjoy shopping. And you know, and there are certain places that when we go out on errands together, she says, no, we're not going Harbor Freight. Harbor Freight, for instance, she despises the place, and I despise the idea that I'm supporting the Chinese when I go there, but I can afford some of those tools that I can't afford otherwise. And such a variety. And Amazon Prime. Amazon Prime, you know, I love it because I don't have to go out. I don't have to spend time and money and gas going to one place or another. I can read reviews. I can look at how many stars each one has and have it in 2 days. 2 days. Oh, that opens up a whole world. It creates what's been called Amazonesia. When that truck pulls up the yard, what the heck is that? I don't I think it's one of 4 maybe, but I don't even remember. I have Amazonesia. Jesus carries on here. He says, the eye is like a lamp of the body. Now, I want to go back here. Earthbound values focus on shopping for stuff, and that enslaves the mind. You become all consumed with the stuff that you're going to need. The eye is like a lamp of the body. So John, in his first epistle, I believe, talks about the lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, and the pride of life, that you want people to see your stuff. You want them to know that you got the good stuff. Whether it's your very, very nice car, or your beautiful home, or whatever it is. Some people like to indulge something called conspicuous opulence. Conspicuous, it's very easy to see. It's very visible. What's opulence? That's over the top. It's over the top. Oh, I know. Okay, now I got to jump down here. Okay. The eye is the lamp of the body. Suppose your eyes are good. Now, another way that that's translated is single. Suppose you have an eye that's singular. When James talks about if any of us lacks wisdom, we should ask God. But then we need to be focused on what we got from God, what we're hearing from God, what we know of God, or we're like a wave tossed on the sea, unstable in all our ways. And so it is with being double-minded. Having a double vision, that I want this, no, I want that more. That's going to take the priority of my time and my movement, my commitment. And so that so easily can be stuff. The eye is like a lamp of the body. And suppose your eyes are good, suppose your eye is single, then your whole body will be full of light. Your body will be taking in the things that represent light, not darkness. But suppose your eyes are bad. Suppose you have double vision. Then your whole body will be full of darkness because you can't take in clearly what there is that you can focus on. And if the light inside of you is darkness, then it is very dark, or how terrible that darkness will be. So it's like you're going to hit the wall at some point. The lights are going to come on, and you're going to look behind you, and there was your life. And here you are. And you're going off in this direction, but you're hoping to be going in that direction. And all of a sudden you realize how dark your eyes have been, how much they have brought darkness into your body. Can you hear this? Does it have impact on you? Does it make you want to think and evaluate what is the measure of your pleasure? I hope so. Earthbound values, pursuing pleasure with stuff enslaves the will. It competes with the heavenbound values that Jesus affirms of eternal pleasures, of loving and serving God. He says those pleasures are eternal, and it's not just on the other side. Pastor Abraham gets great satisfaction, great purpose, great joy in this life, in spite of the terrible trials that he undergoes, because he sees what's on the other side. Paul says, I don't know what to do. Better to live, better to die and be with the Lord. No, I think that what is the most beneficial is that I continue here and continue to minister to the unsaved. Pursuing pleasure with stuff enslaves the will by competing with heaven-bound values, the ones that Jesus affirms that have eternal pleasures now, in the here and now, and then on the other side. And he's going to close like this. He's going to say, all right, all of that to say this. No one can serve two masters. That's why you have to have a single eye. That's why your stuff can own you. It can enslave you. And if you are straddling the fence on this, you're going to find that it's going to be one or the other. The predominant focus will be on one at the expense of the other. Now, which one which one do you think is going to be the least valuable? It's the earthbound. Which pursuit will be the least valuable, the least rewarding? Well, we know it's the root-bound, earthbound pursuits of stuff beyond what we need. Listen, we live in a society where consumerism and materialism are what turns the economy. You know, I'm really focused now at this point on getting off the grid. Prices are going up. They're skyrocketing, and this past week I've been consumed, maybe 2 weeks now, consumed with a water issue, being short of water. It's taking a lot to resolve that problem, and water is something that says, right now, you got to make this your priority for right now. Were you raising your hand, Nancy, or just acknowledging? Been longer than that? Been longer. It's been coming, but all of a sudden you find yourself in the midst of shortage, and okay, well, I'm going to have to do some things, and I'm looking for the ways I can do it the least. I want to be off the grid. Aromas Water would like to know how many people in the neighborhood would hook up to their water system so I could have chlorinated water at a monthly expense and pay a meter cost and run pipe all the way up the hill for something that will continue to rise in price, especially as the drought continues to have its impact. I have water running out of my hill. I think God says, no. I've given you this. Do what you can with this. And I'll bless it. So I have to put my eyes on that. And I like to think that I'm doing the right thing. I just have to be careful that all of my time, all of my focus, all of my efforts aren't going into that, because it shows up on a Sunday like this. It shows up. It shows up on not being connected. It would be real easy to skip a Bible study on a Wednesday night, work late. Real easy to miss the Tuesday morning, our daily bread meeting. Miss our every other week prayer time. It would be real easy. And when you do it once, the second time is just that much easier. No one can serve two masters at the same time. He will hate one of them and love the other. Or he will be faithful to one and dislike the other. Pursuing pleasure with stuff enslaves the will. And so what happens here is your will is involved in this. Your thoughts, your actions, just everything that, it's a big part of you, your will. It determines which way you're going to go. It's where the horsepower is in what you attempt to do. Now we know willpower only goes so far. And so in addition to our will, we need the Holy Spirit. We need the touch. We need the guidance. We need the blessing of the Holy Spirit to catalyze and make our will His will. And he says you can't serve God and money. The word often used is mammon, which is more than just money. It represents stuff. You can't serve them both at the same time. So earthly success, this will be my closing slide. Earthly success is not evil. It's not evil until we let it take our focus off of heavenly values and become like that root-bound plant. I will save that plant. I'll spread it out. I'll put it in the ground. I'll water it. I'll get 3 times as many plants. Maybe more. Like if I broke a sprig off each one. Okay, so that's what I want to say today. I could give you the parable of a rich man who had a plentiful crop. You know the story, right? He had an abundance of crop, and he says, well, what shall I do? Yeah, well, he says, he talks to his soul. Soul, what shall I do? I know. Hey, soul, I'm going to build big barns. I'm going to store up treasures in those big barns that will last many years, and then I can eat, drink, and be merry. And God says, you fool. You don't know, do you, that tonight your life is required of you, and then who will get those things? You don't even know who's going to get that. This is a moment where anyone who has any feedback, wants to say anything about it, is welcome to do that. Share Ramona, I can always count on you. Talk loud.
Well, yes, I always have a concern about what you just said. What problem are my kids going to have
Yeah.
when I'm gone? What are they going to do with that stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Like one of my life goals is not that for them when I'm gone. But anyway,
No, it'll come on.
I'm loud anyway.
Won't come. Yeah.
Right. So, like, one of my goals is to not leave a big burden of stuff on
Yeah.
the kids.
Andy, I see stuff outside Andy's fence, and the other day I took some of your stuff.
And that's going to take probably the rest of my life to do
I might bring it back. Oh, see, my repurposer said, you know, that old swimming pool ladder, I could make a stile out of that. You know what a stile is? It's what you can climb over a fence with. I just need the other piece. Okay, well, just set it out there. We'll know. You know, I borrowed your cone the other day. I thought maybe you were throwing that away, that orange cone. And then I thought, no, he probably wants that. Yeah, I did bring it back. I was overcome with guilt. Yes. What did you find? Oh.
All through aromas
Yeah.
are garage sales.
Mm-hmm.
So people are getting rid of their stuff
Yeah.
for other people to have
Uh-huh.
their
It's taking the place of the Aroma Stay flea market sales stuff.
Yeah, it's happening today.
Yeah, I saw it out there. Nancy pointed it out. I just keep on driving. Don't look left and don't look right. Well, I appreciate the input. And Oscar, I see your hand.
Like Ramona, I also worry about my children
Yeah.
and the values they've adopted. I have my son. They all live in and by the way, he's going to South Valley, which is great church. But, you know, he and his wife, they probably make between $200,000 and $250,000
Wow.
per year. And they didn't go to college. They do other stuff. But they don't have a cent in the bank.
Mm-hmm.
I had to create an account for my 3 grandchildren so that they can have something for the future. But they have stuff. I mean,
Yep.
what do they do with $250,000 they spend stuff? And so I worry about, and again, did I try and model that when they were growing up? I did. But they obviously adopted other things from elsewhere, and they continue to accumulate stuff. Now,
Yeah.
I moved back to my house here back in 2020 in January, and oh my God, I didn't realize that I had so much stuff. I retired, and I had a lot of suits and ties and all that, and I haven't gotten rid of that stuff.
Yeah.
And I think I'm not the only one
No.
that have stuff. So I think the message today, thank you, Kevin, because I think it really spoke to me. And I'm going to take action because I think the stuff that I have can be useful elsewhere. So I've got to get rid of the stuff.
And you know what? And it feels good when you go by Goodwill or Hope Thrift or one of those places, and they take your stuff, and they're happy. And I go in there from time to time because I need stuff. Okay. And it's right next to Harbor Freight. Hope Thrift. All right. Well, I'm going to pray, and I'm just going to pray that this has a place of landing, and we can look at our lives. And Nancy says, you know, this stuff you buy, it'll be thrown in a dumpster. It'll be given away, pennies on the dollar, or just handed off, and, you know, keep it in mind. And so, Lord, thank you so much for speaking to us, to our hearts, and to our minds, to our will. I pray that you've impressed and impacted us in such a way that we will begin to live differently. I pray, God, that there would be a generous outpouring for our sister churches. I pray that those who are giving to Voice of the Martyrs. There's so many areas, and we've had people who've been very generous with Cuba and so on. And God, I know that you want us to be like that. We're filthy rich in comparison to so many. And we ask God that you would grow us up to be the kind of people that you have called us to be. And so I thank you then in Jesus' name. Amen. If you want to designate anything for our sister churches, you give it, you just write it to ABC and put ACTS, A-C-T-S on it at the bottom. Voice of the Martyrs, put V-O-M, whatever. So let's have an offering.